The 70s were supposed to be about freedom and self-expression, but while the music got bolder and the artists more daring, radio stations and censors were working overtime to keep certain songs off the airwaves. Some were banned for sexual content, others for political messages, and a few for reasons that seem almost silly today. But if you were paying attention back then, you heard the whispers about these forbidden tracks. And maybe you even managed to find a copy. Here are 10 banned songs only those who grew up in the 1970s remember. Number 10, Love to Love You Baby by Donna Summer. In 1975, Donna Summer released a song that would change disco forever and scandalize radio programmers across America and Britain. The full album version ran nearly 17 minutes, and according to various reports, it featured somewhere between 22 and 23 simulated orgasms. Time magazine coined the term sex rock just to describe it. Producer Giorgio Moroder had been experimenting with electronic disco sounds in Munich, and when Summer came to him with an idea for a sensual track, he encouraged her to really commit to the performance. When Casablanca Records president Neil Bogart heard the 3-minute version, he asked for something longer that would fill an entire side of an album. Summer later explained that she had to be alone in the studio with the lights dimmed. She told The Guardian years afterward that people would ask if she touched herself during the recording, and she'd reply that yes, she had her hand on her knee. The BBC banned it immediately. In America, the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his organization Operation Push condemned it. At least 60 radio stations refused to play it. Conservative groups flooded stations with complaint letters, but the controversy only made people want to hear it more. The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1976. In the UK, despite the BBC's reluctance, it climbed to number 4. The album went gold, selling over 500,000 copies. Radio's attempts to suppress it only prove that sometimes censorship creates more interest than any advertising campaign ever could. Number 9, God Save the Queen by Sex Pistols. God save the Queen! She ain't no human being! On May 31st, 1977, the BBC announced a total ban on this punk anthem, and it became the most censored record in British history. The timing could not have been more provocative. The Sex Pistols released it during Queen Elizabeth II's Silver Jubilee, her 25th year on the throne, when the entire nation was supposed to be celebrating. The song's cover featured an image of the Queen with her eyes and mouth obscured by ransom note-style letters. Workers at the pressing plant walked out in protest. Major retailers, including Woolworths, Boots, and W.H. Smith, refused to stock it. The BBC and the Independent Broadcasting Authority issued complete radio bans. Johnny Rotten later explained that the song wasn't about hating England or the Queen personally. He wanted to express sympathy for the working class during a time when Britain was struggling economically. On June 7th, the Jubilee holiday itself, the Sex Pistols chartered a boat and attempted to play the song on the River Thames near the Palace of Westminster. Police chased the boat down and arrested 11 people when it docked. Despite all the bans, the song sold up to 150,000 copies per day in late May and early June. It officially reached number 2 on the UK singles chart, appearing as a blank space on the official charts. Many people believed then and still believe now that the chart was rigged to keep the Sex Pistols from having a number 1 hit during the Queen's Jubilee. The NME magazine's independent chart did place it at number 1. Number 8, The Pill by Loretta Lynn. Recorded in 1972 but held back by her record label for 3 years, this country song about birth control finally saw release in 1975. And when it did, At least 60 country radio stations immediately banned it. One preacher in West Liberty, Kentucky, devoted an entire sermon to condemning both the song and Loretta Lynn herself.
This chicken your last time, 'cause now I've got the pill.
Lynn was already one of country music's biggest stars, known for singing about topics that made some people uncomfortable. But the pill pushed things further than anything she'd done before. The song told a story of a wife who'd spent years having one baby after another, and now that she had access to birth control, she was taking charge of her own life.
Get up for all those years since I've got the pill.
The controversy started immediately. Radio stations from Atlanta to Detroit refused to play it. The Grand Ole Opry held a 3-hour meeting to discuss whether they should ban Lynn from performing the song there. Lynn later told Playgirl magazine that if they'd forbidden her from singing it, she would have told them to shove the Grand Ole Opry.
For all those years since I've got the pill.
What's particularly interesting is that country radio at that time had no problem playing suggestive songs by male artists. The same year The Pill was released, Gene Watson had a hit with Love in the Hot Afternoon, which was explicitly about an extramarital affair. But a married woman singing about controlling her own fertility? That was apparently too much.
All I've seen of this old world is a bed and a doctor's bill.
Lynn herself had lived the life she was singing about. She'd married at 13 and had 4 children by the time she was 18. She told Time magazine that if she'd had the pill back then, she would have been popping it like popcorn. She wouldn't trade her kids for anything, she said, but she sure would have spaced them better.
And you can't afford to turn it down, 'cause you know I've got.
The ban backfired spectacularly. That preacher's sermon sent much of his congregation running out to buy the record. Even without airplay on many stations, The Pill sold 15,000 copies per week. It eventually reached number 5 on the country charts and number 70 on the pop charts, becoming Lynn's biggest crossover hit.
Down your brooder house, 'cause now I've got the pill.
Medical professionals later told Lynn that her song did more to promote acceptance of birth control in rural areas than any official public health campaigns. Women who might never have known the pill existed heard about it through her music. The song became one of her signature tracks and proved that sometimes the songs that get banned are the ones that need to be heard the most.
This chicken your last time, 'cause now I've got the pill.
Number 7. Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed.
Take a walk on the wild side.
Released in 1972, this song somehow managed to slip past radio censors despite containing references that should have gotten it banned immediately. It talked about transgender individuals, drug use, and various aspects of New York's underground scene. But Reed sang it in such a laid-back, matter-of-fact way that many programmers apparently didn't catch what he was actually saying.
Said, hey honey, take a walk on the wild side.
The song told stories of real people from Andy Warhol's factory scene. Holly Woodlawn and Candy Darling were both transgender women who appeared in Warhol films. The song referenced their lives and experiences in ways that were remarkably frank for 1972. Reed also sang about hitchhiking and other activities that parents groups might have found concerning if they'd been paying closer attention.
Take a walk on the wild side. I said, baby.
Some radio stations did eventually figure out what the song was about. When they did, they banned it or played heavily edited versions. The reference to giving head was removed from many radio edits. Some stations objected to Reed mentioning specific racial and ethnic groups, but FM underground radio stations embraced it completely, playing the full version regularly. The song reached number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, proving that it had found a substantial audience despite the selective censorship. It became one of Reed's signature tracks and one of the most important songs in rock history.
Colored girls go do 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 do.
Looking back, it's remarkable that it got as much airplay as it did. Reed was singing openly about people and lifestyles that mainstream America in 1972 wasn't ready to acknowledge. But the song's casual, almost conversational tone made it seem less threatening than it actually was. It was only later that people fully understood how groundbreaking it had been.
Take a walk on the wild side.
Number 6. Lola by the Kinks. When the Kinks released this song in 1970, it pushed boundaries in ways that made radio stations nervous. The song told the story of a romantic encounter in a club, and the twist was that Lola was not exactly who the narrator initially thought she was. The BBC had issues with it, but not for the reasons you might expect. The original version mentioned Coca-Cola by name. The BBC had strict policies against product placement in songs, so they refused to play it until the band changed the lyric. Ray Davies, the band's leader, was on tour in America when he got the call. He had to interrupt the tour, fly back to London, go into the studio, and re-record that one line, changing it to Cherry Cola. The lyric change seemed to satisfy the BBC's concerns about advertising, but some stations still had problems with the song's subject matter. The story about meeting someone in a club and discovering they weren't what they seemed was considered risky territory. Some American stations banned it outright or only played it during late-night hours, but the song became a huge hit anyway, reaching number 2 in the UK and number 9 in the United States. It remains one of the Kinks' best-known songs and has been covered countless times over the years. Its acceptance paved the way for other songs to deal with similar themes more openly. The interesting thing is how much attitudes have changed since 1970. What seemed shocking then barely registers today. But back then, just the suggestion that someone might not be who they appear to be on first meeting was enough to make programmers nervous. The song handled the situation with humor and humanity, which probably helped it survive the censorship attempts better than a more confrontational approach might have. Number 5, Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones. Released in 1971, this song has probably the most complicated legacy of any on this list. It became one of the Rolling Stones' biggest hits, but its subject matter made some radio stations uncomfortable from the very beginning. The song referenced slavery, violence, and sex in ways that were provocative even by Rolling Stone standards. Some stations banned it immediately. Others played it but were uncomfortable doing so. The controversy has only grown over the years, to the point where Mick Jagger himself told Rolling Stone magazine in 2009 that he would never write that song today. The band eventually stopped performing it live in 2021, but back in 1971 it reached number 1 in the United States and became a staple of rock radio on stations that were willing to play it. The riff was undeniably powerful, and Keith Richards' guitar work was some of his best. The production captured the raw energy that made the Stones one of the biggest bands in the world. The song represents a particular moment in rock history when bands could push boundaries and get away with things that would be much more controversial today. Radio stations made their decisions about whether to play it based on their local audiences and their own comfort levels. There was no national standard, which meant some markets heard it constantly while others never heard it at all. Looking back, it's one of those songs that makes you think about how times change. What was merely controversial in 1971 is genuinely problematic by modern standards. But it was a massive hit, and people who grew up in the 70s remember hearing it on the radio, whether their local station was one that played it or one that banned it. Number 4, Imagine by John Lennon. Imagine all the people. It might seem strange to think of this song as banned given how beloved it became, but when John Lennon released it in 1971, the song caused immediate controversy. Religious groups objected strongly to the opening line about imagining there's no heaven. They saw it as promoting atheism and attacking Christianity. Some radio stations, particularly in more conservative areas, refused to play it. Others played it, but received complaints from listeners who found it offensive. Lennon's status as a former Beatle meant the song got attention it might not have received from a lesser-known artist, which meant more people heard about the controversy. The BBC banned it during the Gulf War in 1991, and Clear Channel added it to their list of songs not to play in the aftermath of September 11th, 2001. The idea of imagining no countries or nothing to kill or die for seemed inappropriate during times of national crisis and military action.
Living life in peace.
But the song also became an anthem for peace movements and has been covered hundreds of times. It's been used at memorial services, including for Lennon himself after his murder in 1980. Despite the religious objections and the periodic bans during wartime, it's become one of the most enduring songs ever written about peace and human unity.
Imagine there's no countries.
The controversy around it demonstrates how a song's meaning can shift depending on the times. What seemed radical and even dangerous to some people in 1971 has become almost mainstream today. But if you were listening to radio in certain parts of America in the early 70s, there's a good chance your local station wouldn't play it.
Imagine all the people.
Number 3, Tonight's the Night by Rod Stewart.
Kick off your shoes and sit right down.
Most people didn't think of Rod Stewart as a controversial figure in 1976. He was known for his distinctive raspy voice and his string of hits throughout the early 70s. But when he released this song, it created problems for radio stations trying to maintain family-friendly programming.
Tonight's the night.
The song was about a young woman's first sexual experience, sung from the perspective of an older, more experienced partner. The lyrics were suggestive rather than explicit, but the meaning was clear enough that some stations decided they couldn't play it during daytime hours. Others banned it completely. The controversy was particularly strong in more conservative markets. Religious groups objected to what they saw as promoting premarital sex. Some stations that did play it received enough complaints that they moved it to late-night rotations only or dropped it entirely.
Kick off your shoes and sit right down.
Despite the censorship attempts, Tonight's the Night became a huge hit, reaching number 1 in the United States and selling over 1 million copies. It topped the charts for 8 weeks, making it one of the biggest songs of 1976 and 1977. Clearly, the public was more interested in hearing it than the moral guardians wanted to admit.
Tonight's the night.
Stewart never shied away from the song's meaning or apologized for it. He'd written about romance and relationships throughout his career, and this was just more direct than some of his earlier work. The song's success despite the ban showed that radio censorship was becoming less effective as the 70s progressed and cultural attitudes continued to shift.
Tonight's the night.
Number 2, Radio Radio by Elvis Costello. Elvis Costello got himself into serious trouble with this one, though not exactly through a traditional ban. In December 1977, he was scheduled to perform Less Than Zero on Saturday Night Live. At the last minute, he switched songs and performed Radio Radio instead, a bitter attack on radio censorship and corporate control of the airwaves. The song accused radio programmers of playing propaganda and mediocre music while ignoring better artists. It was a deliberate middle finger to the music industry, and performing it on live television without permission was Costello's way of forcing people to pay attention. NBC was furious. Saturday Night Live producer Lorne Michaels banned Costello from appearing on the show again. The ban lasted until 1989, when Costello was finally invited back. He started his performance by launching into Radio Radio again, then stopped and switched to the scheduled song, making light of the whole situation while also reminding everyone what he'd done 12 years earlier. Many radio stations refused to play Radio Radio when it was released as a single. The song was literally about how terrible radio had become, so programmers weren't eager to broadcast their own criticism. Some FM stations with more adventurous programming did play it, particularly late at night when they had more freedom.
So you had better do as you were told. You better listen.
The song became an anthem for people who were frustrated with corporate radio and its narrow playlists. It perfectly captured the tension between artistic integrity and commercial interests, and Costello's Saturday Night Live rebellion became one of the most famous moments in the show's history, proving that sometimes the best way to fight censorship is to ignore it completely and do what you want anyway. Number 1. Short People by Randy Newman. Here's a strange one. When Randy Newman released this satirical song in 1977, some radio stations banned it because they thought he was actually mocking short people. They somehow missed that the entire point was to ridicule prejudice by making it absurd. Newman had built his career on writing clever, satirical songs that used irony to make serious points. Short People was meant to show how ridiculous all forms of bigotry are by applying that thinking to height. The narrator says short people have no reason to live and lists increasingly silly complaints about them, making it obvious that anyone who thinks this way is foolish. But not everyone got the joke. Some radio stations received complaints from listeners who felt insulted. A few stations pulled the song from their playlists. The Maryland state legislature considered a bill that would have banned it from radio entirely, though the bill never passed. The irony is that Short People was actually one of Newman's most commercially successful songs. Reaching number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, most people understood what he was doing and found it funny. But the controversy showed how difficult satire can be when some listeners take everything literally. Newman himself was bemused by the whole situation. He'd been writing satirical songs for years, often about much more serious topics, and nobody had gotten upset. But apparently making fun of discrimination based on height was a bridge too far for some people. The song remains a perfect example of how censorship can result from misunderstanding. The stations that banned it thought they were protecting their listeners, but they'd completely missed the point. Those of us who were listening to music in 1977 remember the confused discussions about whether the song was offensive or brilliant, and most of us realized it was the latter. These 10 songs show just how nervous radio stations were during the 70s. Even though it was supposed to be a decade of freedom and openness, censors worried about sex, politics, religion, and apparently even satire. What's remarkable is how many of these banned songs went on to become huge hits anyway. The bands often created more interest than any normal promotion could have generated. When someone tells you that you can't hear something, naturally you want to hear it even more. Radio stations found themselves fighting against human nature, and they usually lost. If you grew up in the 70s, you remember the whispers about the forbidden songs. Maybe you had a friend who had a copy of the album. Maybe you caught it late at night on a more adventurous FM station. Or maybe you just knew about it because of all the controversy. If you enjoyed this trip back through the songs that radio didn't want you to hear, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. What other band songs from the 70s do you remember? Drop a comment and let us know.